It's Black Hat 2022, and it's the Dark Reading News Desk. Terry Sweeney here with Dark Reading, and joining me now is John Shier, Senior Security Advisor with Sophos. John, thanks for joining us on the Dark Reading News Desk today.
My pleasure, Terry. It's good to see you again.
Sophos has just published some original research detailing multiple cyber criminal groups carrying out back-to-back attacks on the same networks. Pretty nervy. Tell us what you can about the unusual nature of these attacks.
Sure. So this started with the Active Adversary Playbook, which we published in June, and you and I talked about at RSA. And back then, we noted some examples of seeing multiple attackers within networks within a relatively short period of time. And if we think back of traditional attacks, usually it's months or years, right? So you get attacked, you clean up, you recover, and then you get attacked again. And that period is a bit prolonged. And what we're starting to see, at least anecdotally, is some of these attacks are now occurring days or weeks apart. And so that is a little bit concerning. And, we feel that these attackers are a bit more aggressive these days. And as a result, many of them are ending up in the same victims network. And if you also think about traditionally how cyber criminals attack, a lot of them tend to be competing against each other. So crypto miners are one good example where they actually will proactively try to get rid of any other latent crypto miner infections, as well as rats who have even advertised in their dark web forum posts that they will actively kill other bots on the network. So then it basically had us wondering, are there other examples out there? And this is where this report came in.
Well, so attack me once, shame on you. Attack me twice, shame on me. Attack me 3 times. I mean, is the competitive nature of this what's driving that? What's the underlying dynamic that is happening here?
Well, with this particular report, we outlined 4 case studies, right? There's different ways that these attacks present themselves. And one of them was an exposed RDP server that led to 2 attacks just coming in the front door essentially in 5 weeks. Another one was a ransomware affiliate using 2 different kinds of ransomware strains. The one that you're talking about here, the 3 attacks, the multiple attackers in one network, were abusing all sorts of different vulnerabilities and failures within the network. And then finally, one backdoor from a previous attack led to an additional attack. But if we look at some of the reasons behind some of these, I think initial access brokers or IABs are a part to blame. So these guys really, when it comes to target acquisition, it's a fairly random spray and pray sort of approach. And they go after a lot of the low-hanging fruit. So they go after vulnerable exposed services and those kinds of things. But they don't also have exclusive access to these resources when they go to reselling when they go to resell the resources. And so they might sell the high value targets for immediate compromise, because a high value target is usually a larger company with a greater ability to pay. But along with that comes more resources and a potentially quicker detection rates. And so you want to get in there and out quick. But then the lower ROI victims, the smaller companies, the ones with less revenue, are staying exposed for longer because, 1, as I said, it's not always exclusive access, and 2, they can be resold multiple times to different actors. And it's not just IABs that are finding these victims, which is really important. Other criminals can also independently discover these victims and breach them and compromise their networks.
It seems as though they are hiding each other's tracks, which is a little weird if they're competitors. Can you help us understand that?
Yeah, so in one case, there was the 3rd group decided that they were going to eliminate what we suspect was their own tracks. And it was a very much of the nuclear approach, right? They basically started blitzing all the logs and getting rid of all the tracks of their activities. But in the process, they were able to get rid of the tracks of the other group's activities as well. So by simply just deleting everything, you delete not only your activity, but everybody else's as well. And so, one might say, oh, well, were they actually working together? Were they trying to cover for those other attackers? I doubt it. I think that just very simply wanting to stay off the radar themselves, it had the unintended externality and side effect of getting rid of the tracks of the other guys as well.
So offense turns a little bit to defense, it sounds like.
Correct. Yeah.
Is this indicative of a larger trend among ransomware groups? Is this cooperation that fuels these multiple attacks? Is this the way ransomware will go for the rest of the year?
Well, it's important to point out that we don't have evidence of clear cooperation here, right? So when we talk about in this particular report, when we talk about these groups being in multiple groups being in the same network, we're not saying that they were calling each other up before and coordinating their outfits and their attacks, right? What we're seeing is that we've noticed this activity, and that something like that would also be very difficult to prove, right? So we need to catch them in the act and catch them communicating their intent. And we don't have that. What we're saying is that there's been a trend of multiple actors in shorter time periods than we've seen in the past. And so I don't think it's really indicative of ransomware group behavior, but rather these are symptoms of weak security posture that are leading to multiple compromise. And the key takeaway here is that if you've left the proverbial door or window open into your network, someone will walk through it. And we're effectively taking the old InfoSec aphorism of it's not a question of if, it's not a question of if you'll be attacked, but when. And we're kind of adding how many times to the end of that.
So this is less about like how quickly can we recover than how can we be smarter about closing off the loopholes, the open doors, as you put it.
Exactly. So with a lot of these companies, the root cause, the initial way in is an exposed service. It's an unpatched vulnerability. It's credentials that have been stolen and reused, but they lack MFA, multi-factor authentication, and therefore the criminals are able to just simply use those credentials to get in. So there's a bunch of different ways that this presents itself. But if you're leaving, as I said, these proverbial doors and windows open, where you're making it a lot easier for criminals to get in by providing them that access, then I don't think it's a surprise, given the nature of how targeting occurs these days, which is very much, it starts with a lot of scanning for vulnerable hosts. Given that the nature of target acquisition, it's not surprising that multiple attackers are discovering the same victim.
Anything beyond basic hygiene to offer viewers with regard to prevention or protecting themselves against these kinds of threats?
So if we look at, as I just mentioned, the way that these guys are getting in, they're going to exploit vulnerabilities. Especially when an exploit proof of concept is available. They're capitalizing on unpatched systems. They're taking advantage of configuration mistakes, and a configuration mistake could very much be you forgot to turn on MFA, right? You forgot to turn on that multi-factor authentication. So to your point of doing the basics, that is ever present and ever important. When it comes to recovering from ransomware attacks specifically, you really need to have your backup game solid, right? You want to make sure that your backup strategy, the old 3-2-1, like three different copies, 2 different media, one of them preferably offline and off-site. You want to test that to make sure that you've got reliable and high fidelity backups, because those are really the best insurance against one of these types of attacks. And then most importantly, you're going to want to have a specific response plan for a ransomware attack. You'll want to know who to call, what systems to isolate, how to protect the rest of the network. And importantly, if your network is encrypted, and if the digital copy of your response plan is also encrypted, you might want to print out a copy and put it in the safe as well.
John, thanks for the updated snapshot of the ransomware landscape. Always a pleasure. Thanks for doing Dark Reading News Desk today.
Great. Thank you, Terry.
We've been talking with John Shier of Sophos. This has been Terry Sweeney for the Dark Reading News Desk. Thanks for joining us for this Black Hat conversation. We'll see you next time.